My grandfather had a raised bed out behind his shed that was no bigger than a card table. I mean, the thing was maybe 4 feet across. And every single year that man pulled enough onions out of it to fill a bushel basket and keep the pantry stocked clear into winter. The neighbors used to walk by and shake their heads because everybody back then figured you needed long rows in a proper garden plot to grow onions worth anything. And here was this stubborn old man pulling out beautiful bulbs from a space most people would not even bother planting in. I have been growing onions the same way my whole life, in tight raised beds and containers and anywhere I can carve out a few square feet of good soil. And I'm going to tell you right now that you do not need a big garden to grow big onions. In this video, I am going to walk you through exactly how I do it, from getting your soil right and picking a variety that actually makes sense for where you live, all the way through harvest, using the same methods that old man taught me before I was tall enough to see over the top of that bed. And the bonus tip at the end is his curing trick that makes your onions last for months in the pantry, instead of going soft after a few weeks. That one piece of advice alone is worth your time, so stick around for it. I can still picture him out there every spring, working compost into that little bed with his bare hands, and he would tell me that onions were the most honest crop in the garden. Treat the soil right and plant at the right time. They reward you every season. Get lazy, and they let you know real fast. That stuck with me, and it is the reason I still grow onions every year no matter what else I have going on. Now, the very first thing my grandfather was particular about, and I mean particular to the point where he would not let me help until I understood why, was the soil. Onions want a loose, fertile, free-draining mix, and they absolutely cannot sit in heavy, waterlogged ground, or you will end up with soft, rotten mush instead of firm bulbs. A raised bed is perfect for this because you control the drainage, and honestly, it is one of the main reasons I have stuck with raised beds for onions my entire life. What you want to do is work in a generous layer of good compost, 2 or 3 inches, mixed into the top 6 inches of your bed. And if you do not have your own compost, a bag of the pre-mixed stuff from the garden center, with a little fertilizer already blended in. Works just fine. You can toss in a small handful of composted chicken manure or a balanced granular fertilizer if you want. But here's where I have seen more people go wrong than just about anywhere else with onions. They dump in way too much nitrogen, thinking it is going to give them bigger bulbs. And what they get instead is a forest of tall, lush green tops with sad little onions the size of golf balls underneath. My grandfather used to say, feed the soil, not the plant, and what he meant was, get your compost right and let the onions do the rest. One more thing he always did, that I still do today, mulch that bed before you plant. Onion leaves are thin and wispy, and they do absolutely nothing to shade out weeds. So if you do not mulch, you're going to spend the whole season on your knees. Where a lot of folks go wrong before they ever put a single bulb or seed in the ground, because they grab whatever onion variety the hardware store happens to have on the rack without thinking about whether it actually suits their climate, and then they wonder why their onions either bolt straight to seed or never size up at all. Onions are driven by day length. The number of hours of sunlight they get is what triggers them to stop putting energy into leaves and start forming a bulb. And if you plant a variety that needs 14 to 16 hours of daylight in a place that only gets 10 to 12, you're going to be waiting a very long time for bulbs that never come. If you're gardening in zones 7 and south, the warmer parts of the country with shorter winter days, you want short day varieties like Texas 1015 Vidalia types or Red Burgundy, because those will start bulbing when day length hits about 10 to 12 hours. If you are up in zone 6 and north where summers are long and bright, there are intermediate types too. Candy and Cabernet are a couple I have grown that split the difference and work in a wider range. And honestly, if you are not sure which to pick, an intermediate variety is a safe bet. But I'm going to be straight with you. 9 out of 10 people I talked to who had a bad onion crop planted the wrong type for their latitude. And it is such an easy fix once you understand why it matters. Now, timing and variety go hand in hand, and you really cannot talk about one without the other. If you are growing short day onions in the south, you want to get them in the ground in fall, late October through November in most of zones 8 and 9. So they establish roots through the cooler months and then bulb up as days lengthen in spring. If you're up north with long day varieties, you're planting in early spring as soon as the soil is workable and harvesting in mid to late summer. My grandfather always started his from seed in a little wooden flat about 8 weeks before he planned to transplant them, and I still think that's the best way to do it if you have the patience. You get stronger transplants, way more variety, selection than you will ever find in sets at the store, and a packet of seed that costs $3 or $4 will give you more onions than you know what to do with. Sets, those little dried bulbs in mesh bags, are convenient, but I have found they bolt to seed more often than transplants do. Use them if you want, but if you are serious about results in a small space, starting from seed is the way to go. If you're getting something out of this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every week with honest, no-nonsense gardening advice. It is free, and it means you will not miss the next one. All right, let us get back to it. This next part goes against just about every piece of conventional advice you will find in a gardening book. But my grandfather did it this way, and I have done it my whole life, and I will stand behind it. I plant my onions close together on purpose. Most guides will tell you to space onions 8 to 10 inches apart, and in a big, open garden that makes sense. But in a raised bed where space is tight, I plant mine 4 to 6 inches apart in all directions and let them compete a little bit. What happens is you get a dense planting where the onion leaves shade out weeds naturally, and you thin as you go by pulling young onions to eat fresh. Those early pullings are basically green onions, and they are delicious, sliced into a salad or thrown on top of whatever you are cooking. My grandfather called it harvesting your way to the finish line because by the time the remaining onions are ready to mature, the thinning you have done along the way has opened up just enough space for the survivors to bulb up nicely. It makes a small space work as hard as a bed 3 times its size. Once your onions are in the ground and growing, the main thing you need to pay attention to is water, and the rule is simple. Consistent moisture, but never soggy. Onions have shallow roots, so they dry out faster than you might think, especially in a raised bed. And if they go through cycles of bone dry and then soaking wet, the bulbs can split or develop soft spots. I check my beds every couple of days by pushing the mulch aside and pressing my finger into the top inch of soil. If it feels dry, I water deeply and then leave it alone. As the tops begin to yellow and flop over toward the end of the season, that is your signal to back off the water completely, because those bulbs are finishing up, and excess moisture at that stage invites rot. If your plants stall out about halfway through, you can side dress with a small amount of balanced fertilizer, scratched into the surface, but in a well-composted bed, you usually do not need it. My grandfather never fed his onions after planting, and he pulled out bulbs the size of his fist. Knowing when to harvest is the part that trips people up more than anything else, and there is a myth floating around that you are supposed to bend the tops over yourself to force the onions to mature, and I want to put that one to rest right now. You do not do it. When your onions are ready, the tops will fall over on their own, and that is the plant telling you it has stopped putting energy into the leaves and finished filling out the bulb. I wait until about half to 2/3 of the tops in my bed have flopped over naturally, and if the soil is loose, and in a raised bed it should be, they pull right out with almost no effort. Now I want to talk about the problems I have run into over the years, so you can avoid them. I had a whole bed of beautiful onion plants, bolt to seed one spring, every single one of them, and it was because I planted a long day variety in a short day climate, and the plants never got enough light hours to bulb properly. That taught me the lesson about matching variety to latitude, and I have never made that mistake again. I have also lost onions to rot from watering too late in the season. The bulbs looked fine on top, but the bottoms were soft and slimy, and that was my fault for not backing off the hose when the tops started yellowing. I have seen tiny bulbs in beds loaded with high nitrogen fertilizer, where the grower thought more food meant bigger onions and ended up with all leaf and no bulb. And I have had onion thrips show up, tiny insects that hide between the leaf layers and leave silvery streaks all over the foliage. A strong blast of water from the hose knocks most of them off, and if they are really bad, insecticidal soap does the job without harsh chemicals. Now this is something my grandfather showed me after every single harvest, and I did not appreciate how important it was until the year I skipped it and lost half my crop to rot in the pantry. After he pulled his onions, he would lay them out in a single layer on a wire rack. Not on the ground, not in a box, on a rack where air could move all the way around them, and he would set the rack in a shaded spot with good airflow. Not in the sun, and he was very clear about that because direct sun can actually cook the outer layers and start the decay process. He left them there for a full week, sometimes 10 days, until the necks were completely dry and papery, and the outer skins had tightened up. Only then did he bring them inside and hang them in mesh bags in the pantry, and those onions would last 3 months, sometimes 4, without going soft. He used to say, "You cannot rush the cure," and he was right. A properly cured onion stored in a cool, dry place with a decent airflow is an onion that will feed you long after the garden has gone to sleep for the season. And that is the honest truth about growing big onions in small spaces. No fancy tricks, no gimmicks, just what actually works in the garden. If this helped you out, go ahead and subscribe. I put out new videos every week to help you grow better food with your own 2 hands.